Good morning, Professor, and good morning, friends. Today, me and my friend Nilanjana is going to talk about the subject managing corporate social responsibility globally and about a case study which is assigned to us, which shows us the importance of CSR activities in today's corporate world. Corporate social responsibility is a company's commitment to manage the social, environmental, and economic effects of its operations, which is in line with the public expectations. It is part of companies' approach to corporate governance and often touches every part of the business operations. For example, it touches human resource, manufacturing, supply chain, health and safety, and many more. Some aspects of CSR may be required by law. For example, banks and hospitals are legally required to protect people's private information. So that is enforced by law. Others are voluntary. The benefits of CSR are many. For example, companies establish good reputation or attract positive attention, save money through operational efficiency, minimize environmental impacts, and many more. One key goal of CSR is global sustainability, which is the ability to meet the needs of present without compromising the ability of future generation to meet their needs. Next, we talk about four different areas in our life around us where CSR is applicable. The first and most important one is environmental CSR. Environmental CSR aims to reduce any damage effect on the environment from your actions. The second one is managing CSR in the workplace. CSR covers a wide range of topics in the workplace, such as data protection, gender equality, diversity, equal opportunities, health and wellness of your employees, climate change, and many more. Third one is CSR in marketplace. Marketplace CSR involves how an organization interacts with its customers, suppliers, and other stakeholders, creating and selling products that meets customers' expectations, engaging in responsible procurement, and paying your suppliers on time. All this promote your brand and business. And the last one is CSR to society. CSR initiatives can be the best way to contribute to the society and its people. Through local or national charitable contributions, business can help the society. Business can get involved in the society and help to progress by taking social initiatives on behalf of the company. On the other hand, when business decide to make positive contribution to the society, they are actually benefiting the company in the process. The companies benefit through lower operation cost, increased sales, and customer loyalty. The next topic is CSR as a stakeholder view of the firm. At the heart of the CSR is a concept of stakeholder, which is any group or individual who can affect or is affected by the achievement of the organization's objectives. Shareholders certainly are important group of stakeholders. Other stakeholders include managers, employees, suppliers, customers, communities, government, and other social groups around us. The next slide is all about whether CSR is required or not, a fundamental debate. The CSR debate centers on the nature of the firm in the society. Why does the firm exist? The idea is that the firm is an economic enterprise seems uncontroversial. But the issue is whether the firm is only an economic enterprise. One side of the debate argues that social responsibility of the business is to increase its profit. On the other hand, free market advocates believe that the first and foremost stakeholder group is shareholders, and managers has to look after their interest as well. Again, the free market advocates argue that if firms attempt to attain social goals such as providing employment and social welfare, managers will lose their focus on profit maximization. Consequently, firms may lose their character as capitalistic enterprises and become social organizations. A second reason behind the rise of CSR seems to be waves of disasters and scandals. New disasters and scandals often propel CSR to the forefront of public policy and management discussions as well. In my opinion, the purpose of the corporation must be redefined as creating shared value, not just profit. This will drive the next wave of innovation and productivity growth in the global economy. The best example of natural disaster caused by human activities is global warming. Global warming is one of the most dreadful terms in the recent times. Hotter summers, longer droughts, more frequent hurricanes, and moreover the rising sea levels that may wash away any island nations and coastal regions. On the top, glaciers are melting, sea levels are rising, cloud forests are dying, and wildlife is struggling to survive. It has become very clear that humans have caused the most of the past centuries warming by releasing heat-trapping gases as we power our modern lives. Now let us look at the what is greenhouse effect. The greenhouse effect is the warming that happens when certain gases in Earth's atmosphere trap heat. These gases let the light come in but keep the heat from escaping, like the glass walls of a greenhouse, hence the name. The issue points to the importance of caring the nature and earth along with the enthusiasm to make a business profit. Now let us talk about what is institution and resource in corporate social responsibility. Institutions and CSR. The institution-based view sheds considerable light on the gradual diffusion of the CSR movement and the strategic response of firms. At the most fundamental level, regulatory pressures underpin formal institutions, whereas normative and cognitive pressures support informal institutions. The strategic response framework consists of reactive, defensive, accommodative, and proactive strategies. A reactive strategy is indicated by relatively little or no support by top management. Firms do not feel compelled to act in the absence of disasters and outcries. Even when problem arises, denial is usually the first line of defense. A defensive strategy focuses on regulatory compliance alone. Top management involvement is piecemeal at best, and the general attitude is that CSR is an added cost or nuisance. However, the accommodative strategy is characterized by some support from top managers, who may increasingly view CSR as worthwhile endeavor. Since formal regulations may be in place and informal social and environmental pressures may be increasing, a number of firms themselves may be concerned about CSR, which leading to the emergence of some new industry norms as well. From a CSR perspective, the best firm embrace a proactive strategy when engaging CSR. Top management at a proactive firm not only support and champions CSR activities, but also views CSR as a source of differentiation that permeates the corporate DNA. The next one is resources and CSR. CSR related resources can include tangible technologies and process as well as intangible skills and attitudes. The VRIO framework, which can shed considerable light on CSR, where V stands for value, R stands for rarity, I for imitability, and O for organization. Now let us look at what is meant by race to the bottom versus race to the top. One side of the debate argues that because of heavier environmental regulation in developed countries, companies may have an incentive to shift pollution intensive production to developing countries with lower environmental standard. To attract investment, the developing countries may enter a race to the bottom by lowering environmental standards, and some may become pollution heavens. The other side argues Globalization does not necessarily have negative impacts on environment in developing countries to the extent suggested by the pollution heavens hypothesis. This is largely due to the voluntary adherence of many MNEs to environmental standards higher than those required by host countries. The next topic is about management savvy. Let us look at the words of John Paul Angel, President of Knowledge Capital Consulting. Everyone gets excited when we have a successful project. I think it makes everyone feel good that our work is paid forward and that we are positively impacting so many people beyond our clients. Now look at the words of Garrett Hasentab, Director of Sustainability at Verdigris Group. As per him, our CSR policy is at the core of our daily operations and guides our future progress. We benefit from these efforts in a number of ways. Our clients want to work with us because we are focused on a healthier and more productive world. Now, concerning CSR, the institution-based and resource-based view suggest three clear implications for actions. First, savvy managers need to understand the formal and informal rules of the game, anticipate changes, and seeks to shape such changes. Many far-sighted US managers realize that competitors based in countries whose government support serious efforts in greenhouse gas reduction may gain in strong green advantage. Therefore, many US firms such as Chevron, Dow Chemical, DuPont, Exxon, Google, and Microsoft voluntarily participate in CSR activities not mandated by law in anticipation of more stringent government requirements down the road. Secondly, savvy managers need to pick CSR battles carefully. While your opponents may engage in high-profile CSR activities, allowing them to earn a lot of bragging rights while contributing to their triple bottom line, blindly imitating these practices while not knowing enough about yourself may lead to some disappointment. Instead of always chasing the newest best practices, firms are advised to select CSR practices that fit with their existing resource and capabilities. Thirdly, given the increasing inescapable responsibility to be good corporate citizens, managers may want to integrate CSR part of core activities of the firm instead of faking it or making cosmetic changes or just giving away some money. Now let us focus on what is happening with corporate social responsibility in different countries. CSR is increasingly integrated as a business strategy and has maintained a proper place in the policies and practices around the globe. A number of factors are supplementing the awareness about CSR in a corporate setting. At an international level, a number of multi-stakeholder firms, non-profit organizations, as well as intergovernmental organizations are taking initiatives to adopt CSR as an integral part of their business processing. For example, in the United States of America, companies have had the luxury of defining and interpreting their own view of responsible business within the context of their own company. Subsequently, they have been able to measure and promote activities with greater freedom than their international counterparts. Next, look at CSR in United Arab Emirates. The UAE is among the countries in the region most interested in the social welfare through the provision of various public services aimed at maintaining an advanced level of social and economic stability. This has included the provision and development of infrastructure and municipal services, education and health. So to conclude, let us see what determines the success and failure of firms around the world. No doubt CSR will increasingly be important part of the answer. Best performing firms are likely to be those that can integrate CSR activities into their core economic functions while addressing social and environmental concerns. Case discussion question 1. If you were the chairman of Sino-Iron in Australia, how would you deal with the Australian government given its negative attitude on Chinese investment? The chairman of Sino-Iron in Australia should have taken up the following actions to deal with the Australian government. The business team, including the chairman of the project, should have first done a detailed feasibility analysis of doing such a big project in Australia. That analysis could include the society, culture, work environment, government rules, and regulations in starting a mining industry. The chairman should have foreseen the political and social sentiments against Chinese investment well in advance so that he could have engaged leaders of both countries at a political level to sort out the approval and attitude issues. Rather than aiming at recruiting more employees from China, the chairman should have engaged a strong politically supported company who have good hold at the local government in order to get the approvals done in a faster pace. Moreover, that should have resulted in a socio-economic development of the locals, which can be counted as a CSR activity. Majority of the hurdles could have been avoided to an extent if the Sino-Iron have approached the business operations in a different way. For example, the company should have initiated some CSR activities that are beneficial to the aborigines from the beginning, such as schooling of their children or construction of hospitals or basic infrastructure. Australian local government was worried about the Chinese government stake in the company and the fear of diminishing employment opportunities. The Sino-Iron could have overcome these apprehensions by training the locals and then provide employment to them so that Sino-Iron would get the local community support as well. There was another fear among the locals and government officials that the project may affect the local environment. The chairman of Sino-Iron company should have taken some proactive corporate social responsibility initiatives to ensure that the wildlife and the species around are not disturbed, rather they are protected. Protection from the unexpected increase in tax could have been added to the project agreement document and agreed before signing up the contract. When business decide to make positive contribution to the society, they are actually benefiting the company in that process. The companies benefit through lower operating costs, increased sales and customer loyalty, greater productivity, and gain ability to attract and keep skilled employees. This discussion question 2. Compare CITIC's overseas project investment and operations in Africa and Australia. What are the institutional differences? How do these differences affect the firm performance? Africa and Australia are different in terms of political, cultural, social, legal, and technological environment. Moreover, Africa is a developing country and has tremendous amount of natural and human resources when compared to Australia. African government have positive attitude towards the Chinese investment, but in Australia, this was not the case. The labor workers of Australia were not willing to do hard work, which impacted the company's performance. In Africa, CITIC could leverage its state ownership background and obtain much support from the local government and many preferential treatments. However, in Australia, the state ownership background of CITIC had not brought any benefit, but in fact, state-owned could easily be regarded as agents of foreign governments and therefore viewed as threat to the national security. The discriminatory treatment inflicted on the foreign firm relative to local firm in the host country. This would not have been the case in Africa, since Chinese parent company CITIC have been already well established and had successfully running similar projects in Africa. Australia has more stringent government policies when compared to that in Africa. The officials stick to the rules and was reluctant to dilute the policies. From the intra-firm perspective, the trust on management team and cultural clashes are the sources of additional cost. Cultural clashes would have been minimal in Africa due to many years of experience. Sino Iron chairman did not trust the local managers very well because they were still leaving work on regular time, taking vacations and expecting bonuses at the end of year. This is clear indication of institutional difference between Africa and Australia. At the end of 2009, during the wave of acquisitions in Australia by Chinese steel companies, Australian people's resistance to Chinese companies increased suddenly. Being a developing country in Africa, the Chinese would not have been faced this resistance.
Now, let me give you a brief introduction of our case. The name of our case is Sino Iron Engaging Stakeholders in Australia. To those of you who do not know about Sino Iron, it is a multi-billion-dollar magnetite iron ore project located in Cape Preston, a remote region in Western Australia. Acquired by China International Trust and Investment Company CITIC Pacific for 100% of its equity, Sino Iron is China's most significant investment in the Australian natural resources sector and is the largest magnetite mining and processing operation under construction in Australia. This case mainly highlights the significant challenges faced by Chinese companies venturing overseas, including government relations, labor relations, and social and environmental responsibility. Sino Iron has been experiencing a number of delays as well as cost overruns lately. Despite the fact that Sino Iron produced 17 million wet metric tons of its 65% iron concentrate in the year of 2017, the company suffers from losses in Australia. By managing various liabilities of foreigners, the project done by the company in Australia suffered from big losses. In 2010, Kimiagari held an urgent meeting with the management in Australia. Sino Iron had to deal with the challenge since China experienced high demand for iron ores. The parent company of Sino Iron, CITIC, purchased a license of iron ores in Australia and launched its project in 2007. However, the project was not successful, regardless of the fact that it had an investment of more than 1.5 billion. In addition to that, there was a significant delay of government approval to the operations of the project and lack of sense of belonging among the Chinese workers, which further added to the delaying of the project. Furthermore, CITIC Pacific's entry into the Australian mining industry was not well planned. Kimiagari was to launch the operations of the project as soon as possible, as well as promote the project. In addition, the management is to engage stakeholders in the host country in order to control the progress of the project. However, they kept experiencing challenges dealing with different stakeholders in Australia. Now, let's have a look at the discriminatory government regulations and administrative procedures appointed by Australian government to Chinese firms. The home country institutions have substantially influenced how CITIC Pacific responds to its liability of foreigners in this project. The intuitional forces include political pressure, trust, and taken for granted assumptions. First, the acquisition agreement was signed one day before Chinese Premier Wen Jiabao visited Australia. From the perspective of Chinese culture, this was regarded as a sign of good faith placed by the Chinese government onto Australia. This may reduce the necessary time required for CITIC Pacific to deliberate and select this project. Trust was a key reason behind the appointment of senior Chinese management team to CITIC Pacific Mining in 2009. The case also shows that the trust between the parent company and senior foreign managers at its foreign subsidiary may more likely become problematic as the subsidiary performance deteriorates. Taken for granted assumptions also played a part on how CITIC Pacific Mining behaved to reduce its liability of foreigners. Chinese MNCs have relied on the Chinese government in many occasions of outward foreign direct investment, particularly in developing countries, to gain favorable treatments, such as importing laborers, custom clearance, and visa issuing. However, the Australian governments were very reluctant to bend their administrative procedures and policies in response to CITIC Pacific Mining requests. Therefore, much effort had been spent on meeting with the Australian government officials, but with little effect on getting favorable treatment from the Australian governments, which led to the failure of many Chinese acquisitions. Like any other foreign direct investment, CITIC Pacific's investment in Australia is generally welcomed, and foreign firms are not discriminated by the Australian government at the federal and state levels. However, there were still discriminatory hazards from both relative and dyadic perspectives. From a relative perspective, for example, the Australian government permitted MCC, a foreign miner, to hire 400 foreign workers out of the 4,000 workers it required. However, it approved Hancock Prospecting, an Australian miner, in May 2012 to hire up to 1,715 foreign workers for their 8,000 worker project. This can be regarded as a discriminatory hazard, as the government has allowed a local miner to hire a higher percentage of foreign workers than MCC, giving Hancock Prospecting a competitive advantage in costs due to cheaper labor. From a dyadic perspective, some government regulations in Australia, the English proficiency test for importing skilled labor, for example, have also substantially contributed to the project delay and consequently cost blowout. This has become the biggest roadblock for Chinese MNCs, but not for English-speaking countries such as India, South Africa, and Philippines. Moreover, some regulations are not explicitly codified or have socially embedded components, particularly in the environmental protection, community engagement, and industry regulations. Administratively, visa processing is also another liability for Chinese MNCs. According to CITIC Pacific Annual Report 2010, we can see from the magnetite mining and process flowchart that how, starting from open mine pit ores, are eventually stockpiled until they finally get carried away in bulk after going through a series of product screening. In order to abide by this flowchart and work in the project side, Sino Iron had appointed a team to deal with historical remains and have a series of exploration. That is when in 2009, it first obtained the permits on land, development, and utilization. Along with the permit and historical remains, Sino Iron finally got the opportunity to enter the whole area in the project site, and this led to the easy operation of construction work. The historical remains team was also very strict to properly follow the guidelines, as stated in the agreement on utilizing the Aboriginals' land. Sino Iron also obtained various environmental permits that is crucial to the development of the project and its future expansion. In fact, team members also observed and examined the underground water, animals in caves, sea turtles, and birds on land in a span of 1 year. And even to ensure that natural environment is protected, they also carefully inspected the environment performance of Sino Iron's contractor. By March 2010, Sino Iron had managed to acquire all key government permits and approvals with regards to environment and historical remains. In a nutshell, the case entails how Sino Iron Project has finally started its production of iron ores by the end of 2013, despite all the hurdles. Due to the huge delay, the total cost of the project was amounted to $7.8 billion USD, which is 5 times of its initial budget. This unexpected delay also caused the price of iron ore to fall drastically from the year 2010 to 2014, as seen from the graph, which led CITIC write down up to $1.8 billion USD in 2014. The case also illustrates many challenges Chinese companies face when engaging in outward foreign direct investment. In recent years, large Chinese companies have adopted aggressive internationalization strategies. Despite the noted successes, they have encountered serious difficulties, especially in the developed countries, facing the liability of foreigners in a different country and navigating the complex regulations and institutions, and overcoming a sense of outsidership. In a developed country, companies like CITIC Pacific have a lot to learn and manage to become successful multinational companies. From this case, we can also see that it is important for Chinese emerging multinationals to adopt an institution-based strategy in its overseas expansion. Institutions provide legal, economic, and social system arrangements, design the incentive systems for transaction activities, determine the transaction and coordination costs in business activities and the extent of innovations, and thus play an important role in the economic development of a country or region. Due to historical heritages and self-selection reasons, institutional environments of various countries in the world differ greatly and follow different development paths. Learning to survive under different institutional environments is also the key to the success of overseas operation. To those Chinese multinationals trying to go global, choosing a country of similar institutional background and adopting a gradual globalization strategy might be a safer approach. However, with the improvement of China's institutional environment and firms having more experience of globalization, Chinese multinationals need to gradually bring in developed countries in their direct investment horizons. Now, I will be taking over again to talk about questions number 3 and 4 from the case. So question number 3 says, what liabilities of foreigners did CITIC encounter in Australia, and how could these be overcome? To this, my answer would be CITIC Group Corporation Limited, formerly the China International Trust Investment Corporation, is a state-owned investment company of the People's Republic of China. Sino Iron Private Limited is the subsidiary of CITIC, and its chairman, Hua Dongyi, started a project to invest in Australia but faced many problems and delays in the Sino Iron project in Australia. Their following liabilities of foreigners did CITIC encounter in Australia. Since Australia is already one of the developed countries in the world, so the company faced many problems from the Australian government. And since also many Chinese companies were investing in Australia, the Australian government was tightening the laws so that Chinese company can impact the local business, like extra taxes, lower down the stakes of the Chinese company. Liability of local workforce, as Chinese company had to incur extra cost of workers for their accommodation. Lastly, government began to implement far more rules and regulations which delayed numerous approvals and greatened the cost estimations. The company can overcome these issues by analyzing the culture and government regulations of the country before investment. This would also help the company to get all the paperwork and approval done in time. Also, the company can get involved in joint venture with Australian company, which would get the support from Australian government, because Australian government would want growth of Australian business companies. Lastly, the companies can also analyze the environmental, social, technological, economical, legal factors before investment in outside country, because host country business is very different from business in foreign countries. Question number 4 says, who were the stakeholders in the Sino Iron project, and how can the Chinese company best engage them? To this, my answer would be, the stakeholders in the Sino Iron project are contractors, employees, and the government, and the ways to best engage them would be, for the contractors, it would be to provide them with work-related instructions and information, and this should help contractors in performing their task efficiently. For the employees, it would be enable them with all the requirements that they need with regards to their job. And for the government, it would be abide by all the government rules and regulations, and provide them with every information needed as per legislation, and perform the task as per requirements. Target Canada opened 124 stores in one fell swoop 2 years ago, but empty shelves, dreary locations, and unexciting merchandise failed to entice shoppers in Canada, a country of 36 million people with a way of life similar to Americans, but with habits different enough to make it a potential minefield for US retailers. One of the key challenges in reshaping Canada's regulatory regime stems from the way rule-making powers have been distributed between federal and provincial governments. Unlike the US, where more power is held at the federal level, Canada's status as a federation means regulatory control is spread between Ottawa and the provinces. That dynamic makes Canada's key regulatory challenges, including the removal of interprovincial trade barriers and the remedies required to fix them, particularly tricky, analysts say. Canada may have a slightly smaller population than the state of California, but expanding across our border is never as easy as adding another state. For one thing, packaging standards are different, meaning that labeling must be redesigned to include French and comply with federal requirements. That's an expensive little extra for retailers carrying tens of thousands of SKUs. There are other cost factors the majority of us don't think of. Minimum wages are higher, and so are taxes north of the 49th parallel. Commercial real estate costs more, and bringing goods across the border on a weaker currency also adds costs. Insufficient stocking was Target Canada's single biggest headache, but it wasn't its only. Setting prices at noticeably higher levels on certain products and categories compared to what Canadians were accustomed to at US locations was a grave misjudgment, despite the fact consumers on this side of the border routinely pay more for goods here compared to what US shoppers pay for the same thing. Canadians were repulsed by Target's pricing. Combined with supply chain woes, Target quickly exhausted all that goodwill generated with Canadians before it arrived, launching out of the gate with dozens of stores that scaled up quickly to 133 locations in 2014 was a tall order, even for Target. The company was having trouble moving products from its cavernous distribution centers and onto store shelves, which would leave Target outlets poorly stocked. The checkout system was glitchy and didn't process transactions properly. Worse, the technology governing inventory and sales was new to the organization, and no one seemed to fully understand how it all worked.